Speaking of Twitter, can I just say that this whole situation with that website keeps getting more and more bizarre? And not only bizarre, but I'm going to say sinister. Because look, we all heard about the first dump of files Elon Musk released via journalist Matt Taibbi, confirming what we all suspected. Namely, that Twitter was working with Democrats to step on the free flow of information, particularly when that information happened to be about the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. But it gets weirder, and frankly, it gets worse, because that same journalist, Matt Taibbi, has uncovered a new thread to the story, that there was an attempt to cover up what Twitter did from within Twitter by former FBI agent turned Twitter general counsel James Baker. Now, according to Taibbi, Baker inserted himself into the process of getting the documents to him and thus out to the wider world. He was censoring, this guy Baker was, deleting and holding back stuff before it was given out for public consumption, for reasons that you can only imagine. Because guess what? Baker, it turns out, is one curious figure. Investigative journalist Jonathan Turley has connected the dots and found that not only was Baker key to the internal push within Twitter to smother the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story in the weeks leading up to the 2020 election, but a lot more besides. Writes Turley, Baker has been featured repeatedly in the Russian investigations launched by the Justice Department, including the hoax involving the Russian Alpha Bank. When Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman wanted to plant the false claim and bizarre claim of a secret communications channel between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin, Baker was his go-to speed dial contact. Turley's conclusion is that for Twitter, which in its pre-Musk days was devoted to building a total censorship and surveillance regime, a guy like Baker, with his connections to intelligence and the FBI, made him a perfect pick to be their inside man with the government. Now, Musk fired Baker as soon as he found out what was going on. But you know what? There is even more to this story, because according to Miranda Devine, who broke the original Hunter Biden laptop story, the FBI was already talking to Twitter before the story landed. According to her reporting, the FBI warned Twitter during weekly meetings before the 2020 election to expect what they called hack and leak operations by what they called state actors involving Hunter Biden, likely to happen in October. This was according to a sworn declaration by Twitter's former head of site integrity, Yoel Roth. And because the FBI had an active surveillance warrant on former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani over foreign agent charges that were later conveniently dropped, they knew in real time that Giuliani was talking to the computer repair shop owner where Hunter had abandoned his laptop, and that he was also talking to Devine, who would go on to publish the story. In other words, the FBI spied on American citizens, knew the Hunter Biden story was coming, they knew the players, and they knew when it was coming. They gave Twitter the heads up to squash the story before it got legs with an excuse about foreign interference. This is, frankly, J. Edgar Hoover level intrigue, the sort of stuff the left used to, once upon a time, rail against. And this is important. Really important, because it gets to the heart of what America is all about. Free speech, the freedom to argue your side, even if it angers, annoys, or upsets other people. To not have law enforcement manipulating media coverage. The founders of America saw this. They saw free speech as a solution to centuries of problems that had bedeviled Europe, and said once and for all, the government will not step in and say, this opinion is good, that opinion will get you thrown in jail. Nowadays, maybe not so much. The so-called progressive left, which spent the 60s and 70s and beyond pushing the limits of free speech and used the First Amendment to loosen up the culture, although in the end maybe they only made it smuttier, is now running scared from free speech. And they say, oh no, there needs to be a high priesthood of moderators and fact-checkers and all these other people to decide what we can and cannot say, read, or think. This is important because the battle over Twitter is, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, part of a broader fight over the soul of the West. The left used free speech as a tool to weaken what they saw as an oppressive establishment. And now they are trying to control speech to become a new, even more oppressive establishment themselves, all while supposedly decrying the rise of authoritarianism. Only when it suits them, of course. When you have what looks like the FBI, or people very close to it, and others tied to U.S. intelligence, coming into what are increasingly becoming the new public squares of our age and acting like vice cops, then you are on the slow road to totalitarianism. It's what the founders wanted to get away from, and ironically, what the left spent much of the previous century fighting against. And that's why Twitter matters so much. Not because of Elon Musk or the right to do things that previously got you in trouble, like saying that men can't get pregnant, but because if you can't speak your mind in America, pretty soon you won't be able to speak your mind anywhere.